Stop. Don't scroll. This is the moment your life accidentally lines up with its real design. Long before cathedrals, before creeds, before a nail ever met a beam, an ibis-headed scribe wrote a map of consciousness the world later mistook for a religion. The temples called him Jehudi. The Greeks called him Thoth. He did not write myths. He wrote mechanics. And if this reached you, your signal just matched the frequency of remembrance. What you're about to hear is not rebellion, it's repair. Imagine a chamber older than any museum label dares to admit. Granite breathing cool, lamplight dragging gold across glyphs that look like math singing. A tall figure bends to a tablet. The stylus taps. Lines unfurl. This is Thoth, treasurer of cycles, architect of intervals, librarian of the ways a soul remembers itself. He isn't writing superstition. He's indexing the repeatable steps by which a human becomes transparent enough for the divine to shine through without distortion. Centuries later, a young man from a hill town would speak in sentences that outlived empires. We would rename the process a person. We would call the curriculum a creed. We would turn a path into a pedestal and then forget how to climb. Thoth's ink was dry before Bethlehem. That matters, because it means the engine came before the icon. You know the silence. 12 years old, a boy astonishes scholars. 30 years old, a teacher appears, moving crowds like weather. And in between, 18 years that the story binds with carpenter's twine and places neatly on a shelf. But initiations don't happen between lunch breaks. In every mystery school worth its salt, an awakening soul leaves home to meet the keepers of breath, time, and symbol. Geography becomes pedagogy. Kemet, where bodies were instruments, and the soul's continuance wasn't theory, it was architecture. Bharat, where attention is a blade sharp enough to cut through the dream of separation. The high plateaus, where compassion is not sentiment, but method, and form is clay in the hands of emptiness. He didn't wander. He trained, not to be worshipped, but to become a clear conduit. The miracles you've heard about were not exceptions. They were what happens when a system is aligned. If you remove the training, the demonstrations become magic tricks. If you show the training, the demonstrations become inevitable. Return to the phrases you think you know. The kingdom of heaven is within. That is not a slogan. That is geolocation. Your faith has made you whole. Not flattery. Feedback about coherence. Let the dead bury their dead. Not cruelty. Identity hygiene. Stop outsourcing your aliveness. Read them through Thoth's grammar, and they turn from stained glass poetry into operating procedures. The point was never be amazed. The point was become. When he healed, he didn't break physics. He obeyed older physics. When he multiplied, he didn't beat scarcity, he uninstalled it. When he calmed storms, he wasn't flexing, he was matching frequency to field. The message under the message is dangerous to institutions and liberating to people. There is a way. We've been told a thunderbolt story. Perfect arrival, perfect life, perfect departure. But the tablets beneath the sand whisper a spiral. A soul returns, learns, forgets, remembers deeper, returns again, each loop widening the horizon. Consider a musician whose fingers remember before they touch the strings. Consider a midwife whose hands know before the first contraction. Consider a healer who meets a stranger's eyes and senses the knot behind the symptom. These are not party tricks. They are long memory. They are what happens when identity is less about biography and more about the fidelity with which you transmit love. This does not shrink the Christ, it magnifies him. Lightning impresses. Spiral teaches. Because a ladder lets anyone climb. A statue demands that everyone stare. A path creates walkers. A pedestal creates managers. If the populace knows that there is a practice, breath, attention, virtue, service, cathedrals turn into workshops. Doctrine becomes curriculum. And the priest becomes what the priest was always meant to be, a coach in the art of remembering, not a broker of borrowed light. Take away the path and you get dependency. Hide the method and you get mystery-flavored control. But the bones of the method survive like rivers under asphalt. Follow the hum. You'll find water. Strip it down. No incense. No pageantry. Dawn. Chair. Breath. One, a line. Sit with a spine that trusts gravity. Notice the one who notices. Let your attention drop from forehead noise to chest heat. This relocation of awareness is not decoration. It is step 1 of sovereignty. 2, attune. Do not think about unconditional love. Summon it. Borrow a memory of it if you must. Your grandmother's hands, your dog's greeting, a stranger's unexpected mercy. Hold the felt sense until the air agrees with you. 3, assent. Whisper out loud if you can. Let this move through me where it could not yesterday. This is consent language. The infinite will not trespass. It waits to be hosted. 4, act. Carry the field into one specific behavior. A message you've postponed, a boundary drawn gently, an apology given without negotiation, a generosity that makes your ribs ache in a good way. This is not manifestation. This is maintenance. You are keeping a signal clean in a world that sells static. If this practice lands, like and subscribe to the Shrouded Codex so the signal reaches the others who are ready to host, not just hope. What happens next? Not fireworks. Fidelity. Your nervous system starts obeying your soul instead of headlines. Coincidence stops being cute and starts being coordination. People say, you feel different, but can't name how. That's the field stabilizing. A miracle is just compliance with laws you weren't taught in school. Where attention goes, reality organizes. Where identity softens, compassion conducts. Where fear loses funding, the body accepts its original blueprint. No one owns this. The carpenter's son didn't hoard a patent. He licensed it open source, then dared us to fork the code and ship our own versions. The scandal is not that he was divine. The scandal is that so are you, in proportion to your willingness to run the protocol. 2 lines, 2 worlds. The vertical, timeless, unkillable awareness. The horizontal, time, story, breath counted between sunrise and taxes. Where they intersect, a statement. Consciousness does not yindi. If you make the cross only a guilt invoice, you miss its geometry. The event wasn't spectacle, it was instruction. Here's how fear loses jurisdiction. Here's where pain surrenders its badge. Here's the place in you that cannot be nailed to anything. Resurrection is not an exception. It's a preview of the human template when coherence outranks panic. He didn't outmuscle death, he out-identified it. This does not make suffering holy. It turns honest endurance into alchemy. Waiting for a sky calendar misses the point. The return is not aviation, it's uptake. Less a single arrival, more a mass adoption of a frequency already broadcasting. How do you recognize it? Rooms exhale when certain people enter. Meetings bend towards sanity. Children quiet without being shushed. The market tempts and is politely refused. The apology arrives first, not forced. These are not saints performing. These are hosts conducting. Christ as bandwidth, not Christ as bottleneck. Many bodies, one current. And here is a thought you weren't given permission to consider. You may already be carrying beta features. 1. Identity glue. Symptom: I am my history. I am my wound. I am my resume. Antidote: 10 breaths, morning and night, repeating, I am the space in which this story unfolds. Not a mantra, a reminder. 2. Frequency leak. Symptom: you leave your practice and hemorrhage peace into arguments, doom scrolling, and compulsive self-explanation. Antidote: micro-returns. Every hour, 60 seconds to relocate attention to the sternum heat. No phone. Whisper, back. You're not performing, you're plugging back into the wall. 3. Outsourced authority. Symptom: you need cars with collars to bless your steps, or influencers to confirm your worth. Antidote: experiment. Treat your life as a lab. Try the morning protocol for 7 days. Log effects. If it doesn't change your biochemistry, abandon it. Spiritual adulthood means data, not dependency. At work, you stop confusing urgency with importance. Your calendar becomes a liturgy. In conflict, you trade the thrill of being right for the skill of being clear. In love, you stop demanding rescue and start offering refuge. In money, you replace the hoard with stewardship. Scarcity tantrums lose their audience. In sickness, you choose medical help and meaning. One treats, the other teaches. You become boring to drama and useful to reality. The algorithm of your presence starts recommending peace to strangers. This is not sainthood. This is maintenance of a clean signal in a loud century. A woman who'd never sat still for 5 minutes in her life tried the Dawn Protocol because she tried everything else. Day 3. She didn't bite the bait in a fight that would have nuked a decade-long friendship. Day 7. She made a call she delayed for 2 years and said the sentence she thought would collapse the room. The room did not collapse. It opened. A man in logistics whispered back at the top of every hour until his ribcage felt like a chapel. He found himself less impressible by panic, more permissive to grace. He swears he can feel emails that don't need answering today. That may be the most spiritual gift modernity allows. These aren't miracles. They're metrics. The soul loves to brag quietly. What do we call a culture where more and more people choose coherence over hysteria, service over spectacle, and presence over performance? Some call it awakening. Some call it delusion. Thoth would call it the return of literacy, because this was never about inventing new gods. It was about remembering old laws. Attention organizes. Identity conducts. Love stabilizes. Humility scales. Do this long enough and the second coming stops being a rumor. It becomes your bloodstream. We are at the door, older hands carved and later hands painted over. The sign on it once read, "Only through us." Someone scratched it out and wrote, "Also through you." Crossing isn't fireworks. It's daily, tiny, stubborn, luminous. The kind of choices that won't trend, but will change inheritance. When the voice in you says, "This is too simple," answer, "That's why it works." When it says, "This is too hard," answer, "That's why it matters." Next, we get granular. We'll translate superposition versus decoherence into behaviors. How to walk, sit, breathe, and speak so your field stops leaking power. We'll build guardrails for the virtual to stable phase so your signal doesn't collapse under observation. Because revelation without routine is theater. And you weren't born to clap. You were born to conduct. You felt it, haven't you? That moment after meditation, prayer, or sudden awe. Your chest opens, silence hums, and the world seems stitched with light. But then it leaks. By noon, you're swearing at traffic. By 3 p.m., the glow is gone. Why? Because coherence isn't an accident. It's a discipline. And Thoth called it the Identity Coherence Protocol, the practical mechanics of keeping your broadcast from collapsing under the world's noise. Modern science calls it superposition. A particle exists in many states until observed. Ancient scribes called it the veil of masks. Every role, every thought, every version of you hovering like ghosts. Think about it. The you who loves quietly. The you who panics under deadlines. The you who almost forgave but didn't. The you who prays and the you who curses right after. All of them real, all of them waiting. The question isn't who are you? It's which self do you stabilize into? That stabilization, decoherence, isn't random. It's chosen, reinforced by every breath, posture, and word. And if you don't choose, the loudest mask will. Thoth's records describe 4 gates where a soul leaks or stabilizes. Together, they form the Identity Coherence Protocol. Walk. Every step is an agreement. Slouching tells your nervous system, "I am prey." Upright but gentle tells it, "I am conductor." SIT. Your chair is a throne or a trap. Do you collapse into furniture, or do you arrange yourself as if awareness itself is seated? Breathe. Shallow breath teaches your cells that scarcity is real. Coherent breath tells them the field provides. ACT, every word, every gesture is a small vote. Your soul is counting ballots. Which self do you elect today? This is not about perfection. It's about consistency. Dozens of micro-choices writing one long sentence across your field. I am stable. I am whole. I am host to the current. Here's the problem. The world isn't neutral. It's a marketplace of hooks. Every ad, every algorithm, every provocation wants your frequency, not just your attention. And if you leak, you feed the grid that profits from your incoherence. Thoth's warning was precise. Guard the virtual to stable phase. Think of it this way. When you rise from silence, your state is virtual, like a dream forming. The wrong comment, the wrong distraction, the wrong ritual of doom scrolling, and your signal collapses. The antidote: build buffers, transition rituals, a phrase whispered before you open your phone. I carry my own weather. Micro returns, 60 seconds each hour to relocate awareness from forehead noise to sternum heat. Signal shields, environments curated, music, symbols, scents that remind your cells who they belong to. Without these, your coherence leaks like water in a basket. With them, you become the vessel that doesn't spill. One initiate, a merchant, described how he lost his field daily by bargaining with anger. Thoth's counsel: do not sell coherence cheaper than copper coins. He practiced breathing before every transaction, and within months, his shop became known as the place where deals were strangely peaceful. Customers swore the bread tasted better, though nothing in the recipe changed. Another, a mother, wept that she carried silence in the dawn but lost it by breakfast. The remedy wasn't hours of ritual. It was walking differently, heel to toe, spine aligned, shoulders soft. By turning her hallway into a temple, her children began quarreling less. They didn't know why. She did. This is the hidden arithmetic of the field. Change coherence, and the room recalculates around you. Ask yourself, why has no priest ever told you how to sit, breathe, walk, and speak as technology? Why give you hymns, but not the protocols? Because teaching coherence would end dependency. You wouldn't need weekly guilt injections. You wouldn't need salvation on subscription. You'd become a living sanctuary, carrying the signal everywhere. A population trained in coherence is ungovernable by fear. And fear is the empire's oldest currency. Here is the practice Thoth recorded, modernized for you. Morning, virtual phase. Before touching devices, breathe 7 times into your chest. Whisper, stabilize. Rise slowly, as if carrying light. Walking, kinetic phase. Imagine your feet writing the word presence with every step. It changes your gait. Try it. Speaking, vibrational phase. Before speaking, feel the air in your throat. Is this word leaking fear or carrying coherence? Pause if leaking. Deliver if carrying. Night, integration phase. Journal one moment you held the signal and one you dropped it. No shame, just tracking. Tomorrow, adjust. This is not performance. It's maintenance. You are not practicing religion. You are practicing physics of the soul just as Jesus did. At any moment, you are at a crossroad of decoherence. One path, react, leak, scatter. The other, pause, breathe, stabilize. Most miss it because they expect trumpets, halos, fireworks. In reality, the crossroad hides in someone cutting you off in traffic, someone mocking your belief, someone offering the shortcut that soils your integrity. Each is a vote cast, not for politics, for your identity. Decoherence or superposition, fragment or fidelity. Which election are you winning? If this transmission struck you, if you felt the leaks and now crave the seal, like and subscribe to the Shrouded Codex. Not as vanity, as signal boost. This field stabilizes faster when more carriers remember. In the next few minutes, we crack open the hidden curriculum of the soul, the reincarnation spiral that turns Adam, Enoch, Melchizedek, and finally Jesus into one continuous training sequence. Not myth, not metaphor, Mechanics of becoming across lifetimes. Because one life is a chapter, the Christ Code is a series. What if I told you the story of Jesus didn't begin in Bethlehem, and it didn't end on the hill of a cross? What if the Christ was not a lightning bolt from heaven but a long apprenticeship, a soul rehearsing, lifetime after lifetime, until it could finally carry the fire without burning? This is the secret Thoth preserved, the curriculum of the soul. Not one life, many, not one miracle. Practice, practice, practice. Picture a garden, not a place of perfect fruit, but of first awareness. A man stands barefoot, touching bark as though it's skin, listening to the wind as though it's language. This was Adam, not the clay statue from children's stories, but the first conscious human soul, the first to hear the whisper, "You are not just body, you are bridge." Thoth says Adam's mission wasn't farming, it was remembering, to awaken inside matter and still feel the tether to the infinite. But he faltered. The fall wasn't sin, it was curriculum. To stumble into matter, to forget, to learn how costly forgetfulness is. Imagine that. The Christ soul begins not flawless, but curious. A student stepping into a dense classroom, shocked by gravity, bewildered by hunger. The first spark dimmed, but not extinguished. Centuries later, the same soul wears a new name, Enoch. The scrolls say, he walked with God, and then he was no more, for God took him. But what does that mean? Picture a man who could not walk down a road without sensing the pulse of heaven in every pebble. He writes, he dreams, he deciphers patterns in stars, in floods, in bones. His neighbors whisper, he never looks tired. He speaks like thunder behind cloth. Enoch's life lesson was mastery over death. To teach that the veil between body and spirit is thinner than a spider's silk. That death is not punishment, but a door you can learn to open before it opens for you. One night, as the story goes, he climbed a ridge and never returned. Not because he vanished, but because he finally stabilized as both man and frequency. The body became optional. The classroom passed. This was rehearsal too. The soul had learned continuity. The spiral turns again. The same soul re-enters history as Melchizedek, a figure cloaked in mystery. A king, yes, but a priest without father or mother, no lineage, no paperwork. The scene, Abraham, father of nations, bows before him. Why? Not politics. Recognition. Souls recognize frequency more than titles. Melchizedek's role? To learn the balance of power and humility. To become the bridge, standing in two worlds at once, translating spirit into bread, eternity into wine. He blesses, not as a ritual, but as a transmission. Those near him feel taller, clearer, steadier, without knowing why. His lesson, divinity is not locked in heaven. It can be carried in commerce, in politics, in bread and wine shared on a dusty plain. Rehearsal 3. The soul had learned to be a conduit, not a celebrity. Now return to Galilee. The same soul enters a small village, into poverty, into obscurity. A boy with calloused hands, a mother who hummed lullabies in the dark. Nothing spectacular, but watch closely. In every market, he listens more deeply than the crowd. In every meal, he blesses more intentionally than tradition requires. By 12, his words slice like light into old scholars' ears. Then, disappearance. Not lost. Training. Egypt. India. Tibet. The long spiral condenses into one body, one mission. This is why his words sound like a symphony of many traditions, because they were. His healings? Techniques. His parables? Metaphors coded from Eastern and Egyptian soil. His crucifixion? The final exam. Not to prove he was divine. To prove divinity can be practiced, scaled, embodied. That a soul can spiral through lifetimes until coherence burns brighter than nails. Now ask, why erase this curriculum? Why edit out the spiral? Because if you knew that Christ was a student before he was a savior, you'd know you are too. You'd see that your failures aren't damnation, they're lessons. Your wounds aren't curses, they're assignments. One lifetime would no longer terrify you. Death would lose leverage. Churches would lose monopoly. You'd realize, if Jesus climbed the spiral, so can I. That is dangerous. Not to you, to systems that run on your dependency. Think of the disciples' confusion. Why did they say, "Some think you are Elijah, some Jeremiah, some a prophet of old returned"? Because reincarnation was assumed in their world. Think of John the Beloved. Why such fierce loyalty? Because their souls had walked together before. Think of Mary Magdalene recognizing him instantly. That's not coincidence. That's old contracts, reawakened. This is the texture of the spiral. Souls traveling in clusters, rehearsing together across ages until the lesson lands. And the greatest lesson? Consciousness is indestructible. Practice it long enough, and you can walk through death as if through a curtain. Here's the part that matters most. The same curriculum waits for you. No, not the same fame. The same process. Every heartbreak you've endured, a chapter. Every mistake that still stings, a footnote in the curriculum. Every strange déjà vu, every instant connection with a stranger. Soul signals that the spiral is wider than this single round. Jesus wasn't meant to be worshipped as unreachable. He was meant to be read as the syllabus, to show that the spiral has an endpoint. Coherence so complete it becomes Christ consciousness. The only question left is, are you willing to enroll? If this opens something in you, if you feel the spiral tugging at your own memory, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and let's keep building this field together. Every signal matters. This is the only encouragement we need to do more. And in a few seconds, we descend into the forbidden chapters, the counsels that stripped reincarnation from the record, the edits that turned rebirth into metaphor, the quiet wars waged over who controls eternity. Because knowing the latter exists is one thing. Learning who kicked it away, that's another. Picture this. A vast hall in the city of Nicaea. Marble columns rise into torchlit shadows. The air is thick with incense, sweat, and the low murmur of dozens of voices. Bishops in heavy robes, scribes hunched with quills, soldiers armored in silence. At the head of the chamber sits a man not in priestly robes, but in imperial armor. Constantine, Emperor of Rome. His eyes are not on heaven. They are on his empire, fragile and fracturing. This is the moment Christianity is about to be rewritten, not with revelation, but with politics. And among the many edits, one truth is targeted with precision. The idea that the soul walks a long curriculum across lifetimes. If people believed that, they would not fear Rome. They would not beg priests. They would not buy salvation. They would walk with confidence. So what did the empire do? It pulled up the ladder and told the people the sky was only for saints. This is the story of how your inheritance was stolen. Imagine you were Caesar. You rule not over one city, but over millions, soldiers on far borders, peasants in fields, merchants in ports. What do you need most? Control. Fear is the cheapest leash. Tell people they only live once, and that the wrong step condemns them forever, and you have their loyalty. They will cling to the church for safety, pay tithes to secure eternity, and obey bishops as though disobedience risks hell itself. But reincarnation ruins this. If a farmer knows his soul will rise again in another body, why would he fear missing one harvest? If a soldier believes he has countless lives to grow, why would he tremble before a bishop? If a mother knows her child's soul continues beyond the grave, grief remains, but fear dissolves. The empire cannot afford such citizens. They are too strong, too independent. So suppression wasn't theological. It was strategic, a doctrine of one life, one judgment, one eternal fate became the perfect chain. The official Gospels skip from Jesus at 12 years old to his reappearance at 30, nearly 2 decades erased. The Church says he was a carpenter's apprentice, living quietly until God called him. But think, a boy astonishing scholars in the temple at 12 simply disappears and returns 18 years later speaking in parables that echo India, Egypt, Tibet. This silence is too convenient, because if those years had been recorded, the truth would scream, Jesus trained, Jesus studied, Jesus practiced. He wasn't born perfect, he became radiant. And if he could, so could you. Imagine the danger that posed to the early church. If peasants learned that Jesus' power came not from divine appointment, but from discipline, every man and woman would demand access to that discipline. They would no longer kneel in dependency. They would rise as students. Better to erase the years. Better to leave a holy blank. Let's return to that council hall. Bishops argue with furious whispers. Scribes dip quills into ink as though each stroke will decide eternity. One bishop slams a fist. If we allow these mystical teachings, chaos will reign. Another retorts, but the people know. They've heard these gospels in their homes. They've sung these hymns in the fields. At the head, Constantine raises his hand. Silence spreads like a shadow. He doesn't care whether Jesus was fully man, fully God, or both. His concern is unity. One creed, one story, one church. Anything that divides will be cut away. Scrolls are brought forth. The Gospel of Thomas, the Acts of Thomas, fragments of mystical teachings. They speak of pre-existence, of rebirth, of the kingdom of heaven as inner discovery. Constantine listens only briefly before declaring, "This is confusion. The empire needs clarity. We will keep only what strengthens the throne." That day, shelves of gospels were condemned to fire. Doctrines that empowered individuals were branded as heresy. And the doctrine that remained? A single lifetime. One chance. One judgment. Perfect for obedience. There were once hundreds of writings about Jesus. Only 4 survived as canon. The Gospel of Thomas whispered riddles. Blessed is the one who came into being before coming into being. Pre-existence, the soul before birth. The Pistis Sophia described the soul's journey through cosmic realms, climbing toward light through lifetimes. The Gospel of the Hebrews spoke of rebirth. Imagine sitting by a fire in the 1st century, listening as these texts were read aloud. They painted Jesus not as an exception, but as a teacher pointing to the path within you. But to the bishops of Nicaea, such texts were poison. They encouraged seekers to look inward, to trust experience over authority. If left unchecked, they would make priests unnecessary. So these gospels were erased. Or so they thought. Copies were hidden in caves, sealed in jars. Centuries later, when the sands of Nag Hammadi shifted, they surfaced again, as if truth refuses to die, merely waits. Perhaps the cleverest edit of all was this: Jesus' words about being born again. In his culture, this phrase clearly meant reincarnation, the soul returning to learn again. It wasn't metaphor. It was literal. Everyone understood it. But once reincarnation was outlawed, the church couldn't erase the phrase. It was too well known. So they rebranded it. Now, born again meant a one-time conversion, a ritual at baptism, a pledge of loyalty. Instead of a soul's eternal curriculum, it became a church membership form. This sleight of hand worked brilliantly. The people still repeated Jesus' words, still heard them from pulpits, but the meaning had shifted completely. And so a teaching meant to liberate was turned into a tool for control. 2 centuries after Nicaea, the empire trembled again. This time under the rule of Justinian, a hard-edged emperor, and Theodora, his brilliant, ruthless wife. Theodora had risen from scandal, once an actress, later an empress, and she knew power when she saw it. She understood what reincarnation did to people. It made them fearless. It made them less obedient. It made them question hierarchies. And Theodora needed obedience. So in 553, bishops gathered in Constantinople. Soldiers stood guard once more. But unlike Nicaea, this council's purpose was sharper, not to debate Jesus' divinity, but to crush a doctrine. Theologians still whispered about Origen, the great early scholar who taught that souls pre-existed before birth, that incarnation was part of God's education. His books were still copied, still read in monasteries. Theodora wanted him silenced. So the council declared, if anyone teaches the pre-existence of souls, let him be anathema. It was official. The belief in reincarnation was now heresy. Imagine the fear that rippled outward. Monks burning their own manuscripts in the dark. Teachers swallowing their words in sermons. Parents whispering to their children, never mention what the old text said. From this point on, reincarnation became a crime not against truth, but against Rome itself. But some refused. In Egypt, a nameless monk sat before a pile of manuscripts. Orders had come, burn them. The council had spoken. His superior barked, the fire waits. The monk hesitated. These texts spoke of Jesus' teaching that the soul returns until it is perfected. They spoke of Thomas writing that whoever knows himself will discover that he is from eternity. He could not destroy them, so he acted. By night, he sealed pages in clay jars, carried them into the desert, and buried them beneath sand. He prayed over the earth, let the future find you. Centuries later, in 1945, farmers digging near Nag Hammadi unearthed those jars. Inside, Gospels long thought lost, proof that suppression was real, that monks' act of rebellion carried across 1,500 years, breaking the silence of empire. One quiet man, one act of defiance, and history cracked open. Now step into the shoes of an ordinary believer in the 6th century. You till the soil. You attend Mass. The priest tells you, this is your only life. Fail, and hellfire awaits forever. You shiver, because you know your heart is weak, your patience short, your mistakes many. If one life is all you get, what chance do you have? So you cling to the church. You pay tithes, buy indulgences, beg priests to absolve sins. You obey laws not out of wisdom, but out of fear. This was the brilliance of suppression. A one-life doctrine kept the masses terrified and dependent. But reincarnation? That would have made them bold. A farmer who believes he has many lives cannot be threatened by the whip. A soldier who knows he will return cannot be bribed with promises of heaven. A mother who believes her child's soul endures cannot be manipulated by priests selling salvation for coins. Fear was not an accident. It was policy. Yet the truth refused to die. In medieval Europe, whispers spread through mystics. Meister Eckhart, a German priest, dared to say, the soul was never born, and it shall never die. He was tried for heresy. His sermons survived. In France, the Cathars taught openly that souls return until perfected. They rejected church corruption, lived simply, practiced equality. The church responded with fire. The Albigensian Crusades slaughtered entire villages. An inquisitor sneered, kill them all. God will know his own. But even in Sufi circles of Islam, the spiral lived. Rumi wrote, I died as mineral and became a plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? These lines carried truth hidden in poetry, safe from censors. Mystics across cultures kept the flame alive, veiled in metaphor, encrypted in verse. Think of the millions who lived under the weight of the doctrine of one life, one chance, eternal punishment. A farmer in Gaul kneels in church, racked with guilt, convinced that one harsh word to his wife has damned him forever. A mother in Antioch buries a child and believes she will never see him again. A soldier in Judea returns from war haunted by bloodshed, certain he is cursed for eternity. If they had known reincarnation, these burdens would become lessons, not sentences. The farmer's anger would be a chance to grow patience. The mother's grief would be tempered by the hope of reunion. The soldier's guilt would drive him toward compassion in another life. But robbed of this knowledge, people lived crushed under fear. This was the theft not just of doctrine, but of hope itself. Reincarnation is incomplete without karma, the law of cause and effect across lifetimes. Remove it, and life looks cruel. Why is one child born into luxury while another starves? Why does one man fall ill young while another thrives? Without karma, the world seems unjust. God appears as tyrant, handing out blessings and curses at random. But with karma, life makes sense. Every joy, every sorrow is part of the soul's curriculum. Poverty teaches resilience. Wealth tests generosity. Illness polishes compassion. The church erased karma because it empowered individuals. If people knew their choices shaped future lives, they would stop fearing eternal hell and start living with responsibility. That kind of freedom was dangerous to empire. So karma was buried. And with it, the logic that made Jesus' teachings clear. But truth waits. In the 20th century, researchers began to record children who remembered past lives. A boy in India recited details of a dead shopkeeper's life. Names, debts, habits, later confirmed true. In the West, psychiatrists using hypnosis uncovered patients' past life traumas, phobias that vanished once remembered. Near-death experiences multiplied, with people describing journeys beyond the body, encounters with light, and decisions to return. Science, slowly, stumbled onto what mystics already knew. Consciousness continues. The same teaching the councils called heresy now emerges through data, testimony, and memory, as though the spiral refused to stay buried. Paradox, suppression made the truth stronger. By erasing it, they made it more mysterious, more hunted, more precious. Burn a gospel, and the hunger to read it grows. Silence a mystic, and the echo travels centuries. Perhaps this was the hidden curriculum for humanity itself. To lose truth, to feel the ache of its absence, to search, and in searching, to prove our hunger is real. Suppression was not the end. It was the pause before rediscovery. And now here you are, not in marble halls or monasteries, but in your own room, screen glowing, hearing what emperors tried to erase. You are the audience the scribe prayed for when he buried jars in the desert. You are the generation the mystics whispered toward in poems. You are the inheritor of the ladder they tried to pull away. The question is not, why did they erase it? You know the answer. The question is, now that you know, what will you do? Will you live as if you have one fragile chance? Or will you live as a soul walking a curriculum that stretches across centuries? Because the story doesn't end with suppression. Thoth revealed a prophecy that when fear finally exhausted itself, the mystery schools would re-emerge, not in temples or monasteries, but in ordinary lives. We are living in that moment now. In part 5, we will open the final chapter, the return of the curriculum, how the buried teachings surface in our time, and how you can walk the same path, not as myth, but as practice. They said the second coming would split the skies, trumpets, angels, a blazing figure descending. But Thoth, the scribe of the gods, whispered something far stranger. He said, "The Christ never left. He walks still, hidden in many faces, scattered across centuries, anchoring the current until the world itself remembers." And then came the sentence that stopped even mystics cold. Among all who walked the spiral of rebirth, Jesus became the supreme template, not by divine birthright, but by devotion unmatched. He mastered the law of return until even the law bowed before him. He became the pattern of perfection. Do you feel what that means? Supremacy not by myth, but by achievement. Not because heaven favored him, but because he never quit the curriculum. And Thoth said, "This age, our age, is when that curriculum returns." Look at the world right now. Old structures groan. Churches that once overflowed now stand hollow. Priests speak to half-empty pews. But outside those walls, something else stirs. Meditation apps rise faster than sermon attendance. Children speak of past lives with uncanny detail. Near-death survivors describe the same luminous presence, regardless of religion. Scientists, once scoffers, now study consciousness as though it were a missing law of physics. This is exactly what Thoth foresaw. He called it the return of the curriculum. Not temples reopening, but souls remembering. He said, when fear burns out and hunger rises, men will find the ladder beneath their feet again. They will no longer ask priests for permission to climb. That hunger is why you're even hearing this transmission. In fragments said to echo his emerald teachings, Thoth declared, among men I walked, teaching cycles of return. Many ascended, many fell, but one remained steadfast through the long spiral. Adam awakening, Enoch transcending, Melchizedek bridging, all were one soul preparing. And in Jesus, the path completed. He is supreme not by gift, but by conquest of self. He became the pattern, and through him the law revealed its crown. Pause on that. Adam awakening, Enoch mastering death, Melchizedek bridging heaven and earth, Jesus, the soul completing the arc. Thoth wasn't saying Jesus was God's exclusive son. He was saying, here is the first soul to pass every exam. Supremacy not as exclusion, but as demonstration. That is why Thoth called him pattern of perfection. Because once one soul proves it, the rest can follow. Now imagine what this means for you. If Jesus is idol only, then you kneel forever. You worship, but never rise. If Jesus is template, then you kneel only to stand taller. He told his disciples plainly, greater works than these shall you do. The church softened it, explained it away, said it was metaphor. But Thoth said, no, he meant it. He left not just sermons, but a practice, the protocol of coherence, daily meditation, breath alignment, compassion drills, acts of service. A religion turns those into rituals. A curriculum turns them into training. When you see him as idol, you say, I cannot. When you see him as template, you whisper, then I must. Another fragment Thoth recorded. Supreme is not the one who holds power, but the one who bends power into service. Thus Jesus, though he could summon fire, chose to wash feet. Though he could command armies, he healed beggars. His supremacy was love that would not fracture. Picture that night, a teacher kneeling, basin in hand, washing dust from his followers' feet. Rome called him threat. The temple called him blasphemer. But he called himself servant. And here is the paradox. The highest soul knelt the lowest. That's what blew Thoth's mind. That the one who had conquered reincarnation, who had bent death, who had stabilized coherence, chose not throne, but towel. Not empire, but service. Supremacy, Thoth said, was not power untouchable. Supremacy was love unbreakable. And now here, us, this century, Thoth's prophecy said, the Christ would not return in one form, but in many carriers. Not one man descending, but a field rising. Look for it not in cathedrals, but in hospitals. Not in pulpits, but in classrooms. Not in stained glass, but in you. The nurse who stays an extra hour with a frightened patient, Christ consciousness. The teacher who refuses to give up on a broken child, Christ consciousness. The stranger who forgives when vengeance would be easier, Christ consciousness. These are the return. The second coming isn't future. It's multiplying now. Thoth described the practice Jesus gave his closest circle. He called it the protocol of embodiment. For steps, dawn alignment, rise before noise. Breathe slow, whisper inward, I carry the current. Moment choice, in every decision, pause. Ask, fear or love. Then act. Service as seal. Each day, one act of service with no recognition. It seals the alignment. Night review. Before sleep, recall one failure, one triumph. Think both. The failure was lesson. The triumph was proof. Thoth said, this is how the pattern is worn. not by worship, but by repetition. Here's the explosive part the church never wanted known. Thoth said Jesus didn't conquer death because he was an exception. He conquered death because he understood the law of consciousness over matter and trained his body to obey. His resurrection was not a miracle breaking nature. It was nature's forgotten law restored. Rome's weapon was crucifixion. Public, brutal, final. Jesus turned their weapon into his stage. He showed, "Kill me, and I will rise." Not because I am chosen, but because consciousness is indestructible. That's why Thoth said he was supreme. Not because he alone was immortal, but because he proved it publicly in the empire's teeth. So where does this leave you? It leaves you standing where the councils tried to bar you from, at the base of the same ladder. When you forgive, you echo supremacy. When you meditate, you walk the curriculum. When you serve quietly, you seal coherence. Thoth's last words on Jesus' supremacy weren't about one man at all. They were about humanity itself. Do not kneel only. Walk. Do not worship only. Practice. The pattern is alive. Wear it. When Jesus died, the gospel says the temple veil tore in two. The church explained, this means access to God through sacrifice. But Thoth said, it means the priesthood's monopoly ended. The curtain was gone. No man could claim to stand between you and Source. That was the true revolution. The church rebuilt the curtain with doctrine and fear. But the original veil was already shredded. And every time you remember the curriculum, you step through that tear. So here you are, not as spectator, but as participant. The councils failed. The curriculum returns. The supremacy of Jesus is not distance, but invitation. Thoth said, the second coming is not his return. It is your coherence. That's the choice. Idol or template, fear or practice, dust or divinity. If this struck you, if you felt the shift, like this video, subscribe to the Shrouded Codex and share it. Not for vanity, for signal strength. The current amplifies through you. So let the councils stay buried in their marble halls. Let empires rot. The ladder they kicked away is visible again. And at its summit stands the one Thoth called supreme, not unreachable, but exemplar. The pattern of perfection. The soul that finished the curriculum and turned back to carry us upward. The codex is no longer hidden. The spiral is beneath your feet. The exam has begun. Thoth's final message wasn't a prophecy of fire, nor of angels splitting the sky. It was a question. Now that you know, will you live as dust or as divinity? Not asked at death, not whispered in heaven's halls, but asked now, with every breath, every thought, every act. This, he said, is the cosmic exam. And the grade is written not in books, but in your life itself. Picture a vast hall of light. No throne, no judge, just a mirror that shows you. This is how the ancients described the soul's review. No flames, no eternal torture, only the unveiling of truth. You see every choice, the kindness offered, the anger indulged, the love withheld, the forgiveness extended. And you realize, it was never about sin or punishment. It was about curriculum. The cosmic exam is not pass/fail. It is progress or repeat. What you do not learn, you will face again. What you master, you carry forward. This is why reincarnation was erased. Because if you knew the exam was continuous, you would no longer fear damnation. You would prepare for growth. And fear is easier to rule than growth. The soldier's exam. A soldier dies on the battlefield, sword still warm. He expects wrath. Instead, he is shown the faces of those he killed, not in hatred, but in understanding. He feels their fear as his own, their loss as his own. And then he is asked, now that you know their pain, what will you do next life? The mother's exam. A mother buries her child young. In the hall, she is not condemned. She is shown that soul returning later, born again as her grandchild. The question asked, did you learn to love even through loss? The king's exam. A king stands before the mirror. He sees every subject he oppressed, every coin hoarded, every life twisted under his power. And then, in the next life, he is born poor, to learn the lesson he refused. This is the exam. Gentle but relentless, never ending until the lesson is learned. Thoth's shocking statement. The one you call Jesus faced the exam across ages. Adam, who learned awakening. Enoch, who mastered death. Melchizedek, who bridged. Each exam passed. And when he came as Jesus, the exam ended. For he learned every question and became the answer. That is why Thoth called him supreme. Not because he skipped the exam, but because he took every version of it. He failed, he rose, he learned, he endured, until finally, there was nothing left to ask him. He became the living key, the exam embodied in a man. And here is the secret. The supremacy of Jesus does not excuse you from the exam. It proves you can pass it too. Before the crucifixion, Jesus told his disciples, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." The church said, "He overcame so you don't have to." But Thoth revealed, "He overcame to show you how." His supremacy was not substitution. It was demonstration. He became the syllabus in flesh. Every parable, every act of healing, every sacrifice was an answer sheet. Not to be admired only, but to be copied. Thoth's words, "He became the pattern, and the pattern waits to be worn by you." Here is the true revolution. Once you see life as curriculum and death as transition, fear collapses. If you fail, you return. If you suffer, it teaches. If you die, you continue. The whip of hellfire breaks. The leash of fear snaps. And when fear collapses, power shifts back to you. That is what empires dreaded. That is why they burned gospels, silenced mystics, and branded reincarnation heresy. Not because it wasn't true, but because it made people fearless. A fearless human cannot be ruled. A fearless human cannot be bought. A fearless human cannot be enslaved. And Jesus proved, the fearless human becomes divine. Thoth's prophecy was precise. In the age when churches empty and seekers hunger, the current will multiply. Not one Christ returning, but millions embodying. Look around. The return is already happening. The scientist who studies consciousness and admits matter is not final. The healer who lays hands and watches pain dissolve. The child who recalls a life centuries past with perfect detail. The stranger who forgives instead of retaliates. These are fragments of the pattern returning. The second coming isn't one man descending. It is a field rising. So here it is. The cosmic exam distilled into one choice. Every day, every moment, every act asks you, fear or love? That's it. The soldier on the battlefield, the mother in her grief, the king on his throne, and you, right now. Fear keeps you circling. Love advances you upward. Fear binds. Love liberates. Fear is the dust. Love is the divinity. The exam is not future. It is already in progress. So now, the Shrouded Codex closes its pages. But the story doesn't end. Because the story is yours now. Thoth said, the Codex is never closed. It is carried in the living. Read it with your choices. Jesus proved what one soul can become. Supremacy through devotion. Perfection through love. Not unreachable, but invitational. Now the exam is yours. Not tomorrow. Not after death. Now. So dust or divinity. If you've walked this entire journey with us, through the missing years, the counsels, the suppression, the return, and now the exam, thank you. You are not a spectator. You are a carrier. If you felt the current move in you, like this video, subscribe to the Shrouded Codex and share it. Each signal strengthens the field. This is how the second coming multiplies. Through you. Thank you for watching.